Welcome to the No Small Talk Pod. My name is Chris.
It's Dallin.
Dallin, why are we doing this, man?
I think there are many reasons. I think the biggest reason that comes to mind is I needed to make more of an effort to have more authentic relationships and connections with people, and starting a podcast was a good excuse to do that. I think, from our time together at Pattern, we would spend a lot of time, going to lunch and having some conversations around things that maybe you don't have conversations about with your first interactions when you first meet people, for example. So, um, yeah, it's mostly an excuse to have good, authentic conversations with other people and develop relationships with new people, and I guess just talk about things that we feel like go untalked about with other people because either one, they're too afraid to have those conversations, or two, we just get too busy in life and we don't make the time to talk about things that are actually really important in this life. So,
Right.
I mean, that's probably my biggest reason.
Yep, same here. I think another one of the reasons why we wanted to do this is a way to actually record our thoughts so that we don't forget the things that we say, because there are a lot of times our conversations are so complicated and I hate using the word, but nuanced, to where I often forget points that I made or points that you made. So this is a way for us to kind of record, in my belief, sometimes very sacred conversations. And so my hope from this is that other people can maybe learn from us, laugh at us, give us feedback, critiques of our lines of logic. But ultimately, we want to build connection, understand one another more deeply, and understand the true essence of life more fully.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't know. I want the conversations to feel super organic, right? Like
Yeah,
it feels really awkward staring at this mic right now
it does.
across the table doing this for the first time, obviously, and I'm sure it'll feel awkward for anyone who decides to listen to it. But um, I don't know. I have a lot of experiences where I feel really good in my life, where I feel a sense of connection to God and other people when I write my thoughts down and when I spend time journaling, I guess you could call it, or writing about a topic that I feel strongly about. And every time that I sit down at the computer and I write for 30 minutes, an hour about something that I feel passionate about, and I put those thoughts out there, and I take the time to be intentional about them. Um, I don't know, it's very fulfilling. And so that's kind of the idea behind this is hey, let's put these thoughts down on quote unquote paper. Let's record them. I think they're great conversations to have. I think other people might be interested in hearing what we're thinking about as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, from the conversations we had at lunch, I don't know, these are topics that for example, around the Mormon church that I think some people don't want to talk about within the church, and maybe they can't talk about them with people who have left the church because it's so taboo, or it's
Toxic.
yeah, toxic, or I don't know, you don't want to talk about these things with your friends in case they get offended, you know?
Right.
So whether people decide to listen to this or not, I don't care. I want them recorded, sitting down at the table and making an effort to record them and to have a topic or a range of topics makes it very intentional for myself. And um, so anyways, I hope that it helps me become a little bit more intentional in um, how I approach my life, number one. And number two, if people want to listen in, great. I think that there will be some good conversations, honestly,
Yeah.
and some hot takes, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's something that me and you talked about. Do we want to put these out and record them?
Yeah. I don't know.
Because once they're out there,
They're out
it's
there.
yeah, it's hard to take back. But
Yeah. So some context, Down and I are lifelong friends, been friends since my freshman year in high school. Grew up together. Down was my best man at my wedding.
I forgot about that, by the way.
Oh, well, thanks. It's just kind of the one of the most important days of my life in school. I wasn't his best man, so that's something to point out. But so we've been lifelong friends, and we disagree with one another a lot, but we also agree with one another a lot. And I think one of the things that sets, I guess, this relationship apart from other relationships is like I can fully disagree with Dallin and still love him as a person, and I know that he still respects me and loves me as a person. So it may get heated per se, but there's never been a conversation yet where I felt like this relationship has been hurt. In fact, I think most of the time it strengthens it. So hopefully it's as entertaining for everybody else as it is for us, and hopefully we get better at producing this so that the audio is better, and ultimately we have a camera and everything to record our facial expressions, and so you guys can catch how our tone comes across, because sometimes I've been told my tone can come across a certain way but my face looks something different. So hopefully we can get the hang of this really quick.
And I think I think our plan is like it's not just going to be me and you, right? I think another goal is like to be able to create other authentic relationships and bring other people on the podcast, have an excuse to like sit around a table and talk about these things, like whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's philosophy, whether it's sports or business related. Like I think when you came to me and you're like, hey, let's make a topic, like what do we want to be? And I don't know, I'd rather just have it more narrow, like the No Small Talk podcast. Like we want to talk about things that are authentic, that really matter. And if it's Liverpool FC tomorrow that matters to us, like let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And if it's the nature of Jesus Christ the next day, let's talk about that. But I don't want to be pigeonholed into like one topic. Maybe it's better to get followers and subscribers if you like narrow it down into one topic, but that wasn't the end goal for us. It's more of an opportunity to journal and record our conversations and be a little bit more intentional about that. So
build and strengthen relationships. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that, like, creating a list of who we'd like on here. I'm thinking some like professors from certain schools around here. I think would be really cool. I may feel a little inadequate to talk to some professors or some business professionals that we know. Dallin is formerly a semi-pro soccer player, so he's got some connections with pro and semi-pro athletes out there. So it'd be great to talk to them and get their life experience. See what drove them to become who they are. I don't know, shining the spotlight on like regular everyday people that don't normally get that, and just learning about them and seeing what we can learn from them, I think will be a really cool experience for both of us.
Yeah, I think just kind of to echo like where this originated from, it kind of started with lunches. Me and Chris worked at the same company for a while called Pattern.
Thanks to Down.
And we would go to lunch. Harmon's, believe it or not, a grocery store.
Yeah.
And there's a second level, and we go up there, and there was one conversation. I think we talked for like an hour and a half during our lunch break.
Yeah.
And I looked up at him and I was like, dude, I wish more people would talk to me about these things. And I wonder if there are a lot of people out there that would like to just kind of listen in on these conversations and add their input. So I don't really know how we're going to go about getting other people's input. Maybe we post this on social media or get it out, and if people want to join the podcast, they can. But at the end of the day, like we just want that's kind of where it came from. Like, let's get these down on paper, quote unquote, and see where it goes from there. So we don't have a plan. There's no organization.
Right now.
It kind of feels like just a bunch of rambling, and maybe it will in the future as well. But I think like one of the big topics that me and you usually always settle on is religion, and specifically Mormonism or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I've had several experiences over the past 3-4 years, 5 years, whatever it was, where I've kind of gone through this like searching period, and my relationship with the church is
I'd say it's longer than 3-4 years. It's been like your whole life, dude.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's been my whole life where I've had a relationship with the church, but it's changed quite dramatically over the past 3-4 years, and I would say for the better. Like I feel a lot healthier, and so I know that you have different opinions on um, my thoughts when it comes to certain beliefs within the Mormon Church and Christianity in general. And the reason I love talking to you about it is because you're so well thought out about these things, and it almost feels like I can just throw anything at you, and it's like you're always gonna come back with some kind of rebuttal. And so I was actually telling one of my buddies, he was asking me like, interesting that you're gonna do it with Chris, like why Chris? And I'm like, well, he's so easy to engage in argue and argue with, because he can throw things back right at you, and he makes you think about your arguments, and he doesn't just say, oh yeah, that's a good point, like he really comes back. So it's very easy to play devil's advocate with you, and that's something that I love to do, because I think that if you can't see the other side of the argument and you can only see your side of the argument, then like what's the point? There is absolutely no point. So that's one of the things that I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about is Mormonism, Christianity in general, the philosophy of religion, and just cultural things like that.
Yeah, Dallin studied philosophy in college, and I took a couple courses. But we're not philosophy savants. But growing up, my parents were split political parties. So one of them was a staunch conservative, Rush Limbaugh conservative, and the other one came from a country that is kind of known as a socialist country and grew up in a much different way than my dad did. She was, there you go. Well, I spoiled it. My dad's from Utah, my mom's from Australia, and she wasn't born a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but my dad was. My dad actually baptized her on his mission, which was it's an amazing story. Maybe one day I'll share it on here with their grace. But the only thing that they ever really fought about was politics. And I actually loved it growing up because, like what Dallin just said, I got to see two sides of a coin. I didn't grow up with just one philosophical belief, one political belief. I got the exposure of like kind of both extremes sometimes. And it allowed me to like make an educated decision. And like Dallin, like I have the exact same belief of like if you're not even willing to hear the other side, you don't care about the truth. Or at least you don't care about it enough to hear the other side. Because sometimes, and a lot of the times, the truth is on the other side. And if you're not afraid to explore it, then, what do you really care about? So it can be scary sometimes hearing other beliefs, but that's one thing I like about Dallin is one of the things that he does is he challenges the status quo, whether he means to or not. And it forces me to think about what I actually believe.
Totally.
And so
let's just cut to the chase, bro. Like I honestly think most of this podcast will be geared towards religion, if I'm being honest.
You started off like this might be anything.
Yeah, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I really don't, because like someday maybe we want to talk about something else or talk to some guy about his business. I don't know. Like I just want an excuse to have authentic conversations. But between you and me, like we both know where this is going. Right? Like,
I know.
we're gonna be talking about the church. We're gonna be talking about Mormonism, like different hot takes around that, and there's just been a lot going on in my life for the last 3-4 years that I don't know. I want to get out there and I want people to hear. And I think that if we don't start talking about these things, or if we're not willing to start talking about these things, like the divide is just going to get greater and greater and greater. And I think that if I'm being totally transparent, there's a lot of good people leaving the church and throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that are in the church, staying in the Mormon church, that are absolutely misguided and using it as a total crutch, and the focus is not on Jesus Christ, right? So like on both sides of the spectrum, there are things that I feel like need to be corrected. And of course everyone would agree with me on that, but I don't know. I think that, if we're speaking real, like it's mostly gonna be
about the church.
a religious,
Yeah.
philosophical
Semi-political.
conversation,
Yeah.
you know?
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
I'm really excited. I think that you know, as we get better at this, it'll probably be a little bit easier to listen to, but you got to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
may feel awkward for the first couple of episodes, but
Yeah.
you got to send it, dude.
And I may text down and be like, hey man, I think we should talk about this in the next pod, and we may post on our social medias like questions that I think that might be a good idea, like questions that we'll talk about or maybe talk about in the upcoming podcast. I think that preparation to some degree, like we talked about, maybe we read something, see what our thoughts are, like maybe we look up something that is controversial or maybe something that we have different beliefs in and do kind of research on it and see what we came up with, or because a lot of it is on stuff that I already know, but like I said earlier, like after our conversations, I typically look up a lot more. I'm like, okay, well, what Dan was saying about garments, like that, like.
Whoa, we're getting into garments.
I know, right? Like, yeah, I guess I probably should, but I'll get into that later. But what Dan said about that the other day really made me think about it. What do I really think about that? So it made me look up different articles and talks and everything like that. So we'll try to educate people because I know that everyone listening won't be members of the church. So this will be, if you're interested in it, very educational. We'll try to explain things as we go along for the listener. And we apologize if we don't, but yeah, we want to keep it as real as possible, so we don't want to interrupt the flow, but we do want people that are listening to understand what we're talking about, why we're talking about it, why it's important to us, and you know, context around the topic in general. And I think it's what Dan was saying earlier, playing devil's advocate or doing straw man for the other person's belief is really helpful. So a lot of times I push back on Dan, even though I don't even believe in what I'm saying, but I just want him to think about it more, and like I want to think about it more. And I know he does the same a lot of the times, but yeah.
Oh, that's all I do, dude.
I know that's
devil's advocate.
I know you're not. I know you don't believe what you're saying right now, but
maybe not. But yeah, I think it'll be good. And you know, if you want to tune in, feel free to. But our audience definitely will be geared towards those who, you know, are religious or want to be religious or have a background in religion or are considering being religious, because you know, at the end of the day, when it all comes down to it, like, we're all gonna die, right? Like,
yeah.
that's gonna happen, and
Yep.
whether there's something out there or not, like those are things that I'd like to talk about. Those are the things that I think really matter. So, anyways, we'll see where this goes, but yeah, happy to have you. Happy to be doing this with you, and hopefully it gets a little bit less awkward as we go along.
I hope so, man.